To an outsider, the rain-swept and much shortened 1987 race may have seemed like a washout. But for the hardcore competitors, those were the things that made 1987 one of the best roofs in years. At least that's what they said after the event. Veteran off-roader Alfie Cox won that one for Brute Yamaha and celebrated with an exuberant wheelie. Not far behind was Jürgen Meyer, one of the visiting German KTM riders, who after a cautious start on Thursday would prove a major force in the event. The race for up to 250cc bikes also provided thrills and spills. Privateer Clive Strugnell was another who fell within the first 200 metres of the 900-kilometre race. Hilton Beattie on another Brute Yamaha was an easy winner of this class. The fiercely competitive 200cc class was won by Gavin Nimmo, making it a clean sweep in the streets for the Brute Yamaha team. Last year's motorcycle winner, Willie Ireland, gave us his thoughts on the prospects for 1987.
Last year, we were very lucky. It was a very dry year, very hot. There was no rivers overflowing or anything like that. It was, for us that did a few of the passes that was new to us, was quite difficult. So this year it will be easier if you think of it that way. But now after the rain and everything, it's going to be quite different. It's going to be much more of a challenge for all of us. And even with the 3 Germans out here, which they are used to this kind of conditions, and I think if they can do it, we can do it.
After the cars and trucks had completed their round-the-houses races, they followed the bikers to the off-road section, where the unfamiliar depth of the rain-swollen rivers gave them a better idea of what was to come over the next 2 days. Mother Nature was going to make the 21st birthday roof one to remember. Last year's car winner for Nissan, Hannes Krobler, who was also quickest round the houses this year, summed up the four-wheelers' point of view.
Ons het verlede jaar ons die roof gewen. Ons was baie bly geweest omtrent met 1 uur en 40 minute gewen. Hierdie jaar het ons natuurlijk 'n klomp sneeu op die berge. Dis redelik nat op die oomblik hierso. Maar ek dink dit vir alle ouens is dieselfde, so ek dink ons kan baie goed doen. Die voertuig is in 'n baie goeie toestand en ek is baie bly dat ons weer hierso is. Verlede jaar het ek nie gedink ek gaan ooit die roof weer ry na hy so rof was nie, maar ons is hierso. As die motorsport gou jou eenmaal verby het, dan kom jy maar weer terug.
Meeting the Nissan Challenge were a pair of Toyota dealer team turbocharged Land Cruisers. Though this one, the Cressida engine version of Johan Steenkamp and Leon Joubert, didn't take kindly to getting its electrics wetted. Rally crew Cassie Coetzee and Wiley Harrington adopted a cautious approach in their unique 4x4 converted Nissan 1400, to the obvious frustration of Western Transvaal farmers Api Reneke and Lucas Dreyer in their seemingly indestructible Nissan Safari monster. But once clear of the water, Coetzee, with typical off-road racing sportsmanship, let the Safari through. Once professional motorsport photographer Clive Smith is on the other end of the camera as he gives an inside view of off-road racing at the wheel of the imported Russian-built Lada Niva Quattro that he shared with the Star's lady reporter Melanie Gosling. They had an intermittent fuel starvation problem on the first day and were nearly stopped in their tracks by a seized axle on the second. It went on to achieve a remarkable finish on the cars and Melanie's roof debut. Flying the flag for British 4x4 maker Land Rover was this much modified Range Rover driven by Gerhard Degener and navigated by Jacques van Kraan. In a remarkable fluke, they were destined eventually to feature in a dead heat for 4th place with Gert's brother Klaus, who drives the fastest single-seater in off-road racing. Pierre Klaus, in his Sun International King Scorpion, shows the determined style that gained him the fastest overall time for day one, which gave him pole position for the start of Friday's 420-kilometre route to the south of Maseru. Competitors returned to the Lesotho Sun Hotel, where many of them faced hours of hard work to ready their vehicles for a day of mountain torture. They woke to a wet and dismal morning, with Klaus Degener leading off into the pre-dawn darkness at 5:30 a.m., followed 3.5 minutes later by Hannes Grobler and Piet Swanepoel. Things were looking good for the privateers in their off-road specials as Jack Spencer and Steve Vermaak were third away in their Duckham Sandmaster, with Derek Pinoy and Jack Purchase hard on their heels in a similar vehicle. Philip Milan and Brian Holt were sixth, leading the Toyota Challenge with Api Renneke's Nissan eighth. First biker away was Hilton Beattie, followed by the KTM of fellow South African Willie Ireland, and then Yamaha's Alfie Cox. The best placed German was Jürgen Meyer in fourth place on a KTM 350, followed 18 seconds later by leading Lesotho rider Patrick Andrews. The route was largely the same for cars and bikes, except that only the bikers had the dubious pleasure of tackling Baboon's Pass. Meanwhile, many of the cars were becoming irretrievably stuck at the first major river crossing. Among these early casualties was Hannes Grobler, who got stuck, then broke his transmission in his battle to get out. A tough 100-kilometre loop had to be tackled twice, and by the time the first bikers emerged from the loop the first time, Jürgen Meyer had moved into a lead that he was to hold to the end. After a persistently wet European season, the rain and the mud were tailor-made for the Germans, with Joachim Saar next through. When the first four-wheeler arrived, it was the Philip Milan Toyota, looking strange on its skinny tyres, which nonetheless were proving a wise choice in the slithery mud. Having a trouble-free run, Milan and Holt were able to go straight through the service point without stopping. The next two-wheeler through, and the first South African, was Willie Ireland, with fellow KTM rider Jeremy Davies not far behind and determined soon to pass him. By now, the third German, Stefan Bernhardt, was on his way to hospital after colliding with a four-wheeled competitor. Fortunately, his injuries were not too serious. Api Renneke was the next four-wheel driver to emerge from the mountain. Clean and dry in the cab of their truck, Renneke and Dreyer set off straight into the second loop, taking second place while the drivers of the open-wheel screenless specials needed long stops to rinse the mud out of their eyes. Some of them, blinded by mud flung from their own wheels, retired from the race altogether. In the conditions, the 4x4 trucks reigned supreme, and by day's end, they occupied the first 6 places. Philip Milan more than 2 hours ahead of Derek Pinoy, who was 7th in the highest place Sandmaster. Klaus Degener, who'd started the day first, was now down in 8th place overall. Philip Milan had good reason to be feeling pleased.
Dis heeltemal 'n ander jaar hierdie met die nattigheid. Ons het die afgelope paar jare so baie droë tyd gehad. Dat die ondervinding wat die manne opgebou het met die min reën was heeltemal 'n ander tipe kultuur wat 'n mens moes bearbei met hierdie motorkarretjies, en dit het baie gou gewys dat die mense gaan hierdie wedren klaarmaak wat die regte bande het, en die manne met die breë bande en swaan sou baie swaar kry.
Of the 60 cars and 100 bikes that had started on Friday, only 16 cars and 32 bikes restarted for the final day. Despite bright sunshine in the lowlands, much of the mountains were still snowbound, and both car and bike routes were substantially shortened as a result. car route involved a 120-kilometre thrash out to Pitseng and then back again by the same route. As Reinicker tried to cut into Milan's 32-minute cushion from the previous day, mud was not a problem. The Nissan driver made light work of this river crossing. Linton Draper and Peter Smith, meanwhile, were having a steady run in third place in another safari. Derek Pinoy and Jack Purchase were really flying at this stage in their Sandmaster, but was soon to be badly delayed by a broken drive shaft. Also running strongly was Gert Degener's Range Rover. Klaus Degener was fighting his way back up the field, quickly hauling in the ex-Paris-Dakar Toyota Hilux of brothers Stratford and Dirk Vogt, who let him by with a minimum of delay. With a fresh axle installed, the Star Lada was also back in the hunt, looking set for a debut finish to celebrate Melanie Gosling's birthday. The bikers were able to have a good lie-in before setting off on their own shortened route. But while it may have been short, it certainly wasn't sweet. That old favourite, Letele Pass, certainly hadn't been improved by the heavy spring rains in the preceding weeks. Rampai Pass had to be cancelled, as the marshals hadn't been able to get through to their duty point at the far side. In second place, Joachim Sauer was gaining on fellow German Jürgen Meyer. Jeremy Davies, who started the day in third place, was also hauling in the Germans, but at the same time was being caught by teammate Willie Ireland. Apart from a puncture on the outbound leg, the leading Toyota was still running strongly with a comfortable margin on the return leg. Linton Draper inherited second place when Api Reinicker took a wrong turning, but the crew of the green and yellow monster fought back in a storming high-speed charge. They were lucky still to be in the running at all, having earlier rolled their Nissan on the outbound leg. Fortunately, it happened in a village, and the thrilled onlookers soon put the truck back on its wheels. Willie Ireland had by now caught Jeremy Davies, and the local heroes were riding virtually together on the road as they tried to reel in the Germans in dry, dusty conditions that better suited their experience and riding styles. This river wasn't quite as deep as it looked. As the riders got closer to home, the gaps between the first four was shrinking. But even this kind of riding by Sauer wasn't enough to catch Meyer on motorcycle number 6, who was fired up with the prospect of beating Sauer, the rider seeded number 2 in the world. After 12 hours, 14 minutes and 16 seconds of grueling riding, the young German brought his Lesotho Sun KTM across the line to win at his first attempt, one of the toughest routes since the turn of the decade.
Move to the side of it. Okay, you don't have to pick up Maypass. Congratulations, man. Thanks.
Less than 3 minutes behind, Joachim Saar made it a 1-2 for the KTM riding visitors. "15 minutes later, Ireland and Davies raced in just 3 seconds apart. The best-placed South Africans at least had the consolation of beating the Germans' times for the day. Had the route not been shortened, perhaps they might even have caught them. When Philip Milan and Brian Holt brought the Land Cruiser home first among the cars, it was Milan's first win in 10 attempts at the roof, and Toyota's first win since Eddie Kaisen's successes more than a decade ago. They were still almost 11 minutes clear of Reiniger and Dreyer, who'd pounded their Safari past Draper and Smith to reclaim second place by just 20 seconds. Had the weather spoiled this year's Roof of Africa rally for the competitors? No way. Tough is how those off-road racers like it. According to Philip Milan, the rain and the mud were the best things about this year's Roof.